Hello, Jonathan. Thank you so much for taking your time, especially out of your busy campaign, to do this Los Altos residents interview. We very much appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Freddie. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk to your members.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I'll ask you the first question. Why do you think you're qualified to be a city council member, although you are already one? And specifically, how do your qualifications make you competent to run the city of Los Altos?
Yeah. Well, let me start by introducing myself just a little bit. My wife and I moved to Los Altos in 2009. We moved into the Grant Park neighborhood where we lived until about 2 or 3 years ago, and we now live in North Los Altos, but we still have our house in Grant Park. So we have property in Grant Park. We currently live in North Los Altos. We have 2 children. We have a 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old daughter. Both of them are at Los Altos High. We love living in the community, and I really felt that being involved in city government was a way that I could give back to the community and my neighbors and the other residents who live here. As you mentioned, I am running as an incumbent. I was honored to win a seat 4 years ago. It was really it was a humbling experience, and I'm extremely grateful. And it has been an honor to represent the community as a member of the city council. I have the further honor of serving as mayor for this year, and of course, I was vice mayor last year. I am running as an incumbent, and really, I think that I'm running on a record of accomplishment. When I ran for office 4 years ago, I made 3 promises. 1, I wanted to make the city's finances more transparent. 2, we needed to extricate the city from costly and obstructive lawsuits. They were costing the taxpayers millions of dollars, and they were preventing the city from getting some of the amenities that we really need, like reliable wireless. And third, I wanted to be a leader in getting the city to adopt sustainable policies that protect our natural beauty, which is one of the reasons that we all live here. I believe that I've demonstrated that I have the ability to lead and to work collaboratively, first and foremost, with residents, but also with my colleagues on the council, our city staff, employers, people who work in the city. I really feel that we are a very large community, and that this council has been able to put its pulse on the needs of all parts of our community. So truly, it would be an honor to be reelected by my friends, by my neighbors. I'm an attorney by practice. I really enjoy solving problems. I feel that I've helped solve a lot of problems, and I think that we're really in a good position to do a lot more good things over the next 4 years.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Realistically, what do you hope to achieve in the first year of your next term, and then in total 4 years of what would be your final term, should you be reelected?
Boy, there's an awful lot that we want to get accomplished. 2 of the most important things that I think the council has done over the past 4 years is, number 1, really get our finances in order, and number 2, sort of reorganize and reorient our commissions. By having a clear understanding of what are our revenues and what are our expenses, we're able to do a better job budgeting to accomplish all the projects that we're hoping to get to provide for the residents. And by having commissions that are able to work more efficiently, really understand their role, they're able to provide much better and useful information to the council to help keep us moving in the right direction. Specifically, over the next year, I think our most important goal has to be to secure funding in order to build a brand new police station and to effect repairs to our 2 firehouses. I think, as most residents know, the police station right now floods when we have storms. Our 911 servers are down there. There's no air conditioning in the building. Simply put, it's not meeting the needs of the police department. And the firehouses too. They're not in as bad shape as the police department, but they both need new roofs. I think they both need some foundation work. You know, the reality is this: we're fortunate that we have very good first responders. And the city of Los Altos, our residents, they deserve to have world-class first responders. But if we want them to be able to take care of us and protect us and look out for us the way that we've come accustomed to, we need to invest in them. We need to give them the resources that they need so that they can serve us. We also need to continue working on the programs and policies that we promised in our new housing element. First and foremost of those, it's to secure a contract with the developer to build as much affordable housing as we can downtown, while ensuring that we're continuing to get adequate parking that we need. I want to make sure that over the next year, that safe routes to school become a top city priority, not just in terms of street maintenance, but also in our budget process. That means that we need to continue to work with the 4 school districts that are in the city, as well as the private schools, make sure that our streets are adequately striped, and that we are investing the money that we need to make sure that we have a sufficient number of crossing guards. And then finally, one thing that's going to happen over the next year that really nobody is talking about, but is very important, is it's time for us to negotiate a new contract with a vendor to provide fire services for the city. A fire department, once upon a time, Los Altos had its own fire department. We don't do that anymore. For the past 20 years or so, we've contracted with county fire. And I think for the most part, they've done an excellent job. But there's 3 things that I want to get from whoever is providing fire services for the city. First, of course, we have to have solid fire suppression. I think we need community education, but we also need to invest in prevention. The easiest fires to fight are the ones that never happen, right? And I think that county fire does an excellent job when it comes to suppression and education. We're moving in the right direction when it comes to prevention. I know that county fire has recently put together a new program that will remediate, mow down lawns that are overgrown, where property owners, for whatever reason, have allowed their properties to become a fire hazard. So that's useful, but there's more that can be done. And I think that has to be part of the discussion that we have as a community, and as we work with county fire and any other vendors that we might want to look into, to ensure that we're getting the best services possible in all 3 of those areas. So more broadly, looking over the next 4 years, we need to bring the city back on track to be carbon neutral by 2035. A couple of years ago, we adopted the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. I was delighted to be one of the majority that adopted the policy. I think that the CAP, as it's called, CAAP, I think it's a great document. I think it lays out a lot of really good policies and tactics and plans, but things don't always go according to plan. I think most people are familiar with the City of Berkeley case and REACH codes. REACH codes are unenforceable right now. So we need to take a look at some other opportunities and see what we can do in a positive way to encourage the city to move toward a zero carbon footprint by 2035. I think we can do it. I think we have the tools. I think we have the will and the community to get there. But the time has come for us to take a closer look at it and maybe make some pivots where it's logical and it makes sense to do so. I also want to make sure that we are investing in our parks. We need to replace aging playgrounds. We need to replace water fountains, pathways, benches. The good news is that our 5-year capital improvement plan really does look at accomplishing all of those things, but a 5-year plan is just that, it's a plan. So as a member of the city council, I want to make sure that when the budget comes around each year, we're paying very close attention to that, because our parks need to have the investment in order to make sure that they're as beautiful as they can be, that they're as safe as they can be, and frankly, that they're just pleasant places to be. I also want the city to invest in our libraries. We need to modernize them. We want to make them more inviting. We want to ensure that they have the space needed to accommodate their programming, and that they're meeting the needs of library patrons. And finally, over the next 4 years, I want to make sure that our streets become safer, ideally by separating motorists from pedestrians, cyclists, and others as much as possible.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Our next question is, what are you going to do to hold staff accountable for and to keep track of the multitude of projects within the city?
Yeah, this is a great question. And, I wish more people would actually ask the question. I'm sure that most of LAR members already know this, but for any who don't, the way it works is this. The city council adopts the policies that are supposed to lead and shape the city. And then, of course, our city staff are supposed to do the hard work of actually implementing those policies. So it's easy for the city to say, this is our policy when it comes to street maintenance. Here's our complete streets master plan. Well, it's one thing to just pass a document, adopt the document, make it the city's policy. But actually turning those policies and those maps into reality, that's something that the city staff has to do. The city right now has about 135 staff members or so. That's a lot of people who are working on a lot of different projects. In order to make sure that staff is serving the community as best as possible, communication is absolutely the key. I and all of my colleagues, we regularly meet with the city manager. The city manager obviously runs the show. You have to have a separation between staff and the council. The council does hold the city manager responsible for ensuring that the staff is adequately working forward on all the projects that we are entrusting them to do. But you got to have that communication. That communication is key. The current city manager that we have, Gabe England, we hired him a couple of years ago. One of the best things that I think the council has done since I've been on it. He has a saying that he's very fond of, and I think it's apt. The city can do anything, but we cannot do everything. We have to prioritize what projects are most important. And some projects are going to rise to the top because there's an emergency or because as a matter of law, we have to take care of something. Some projects don't rise to that level of urgency. What the council needs to do is to make sure that when we're adopting a policy and we're entrusting staff to accomplish a project, we're seeking the feedback from staff through the city manager to make sure that they have the bandwidth to be able to accomplish all of that. That's our responsibility. We also have to make staff comfortable in sort of telling truth to power, right? Staff has to be able to come back to council and say, we understand that this is what you want to do, but we don't have the money to do it. We don't have the person power to do it. If there's any kind of a holdup, if there's any kind of a reason that the council has made a request of staff that they're not going to be able to meet, staff needs to feel comfortable to be able to come to the council and explain that. And then the council, of course, has to react to that. Either we say, okay, what kind of changes can we make? Or we'll put that on the back burner, or we'll put something else on the back burner because we want this project to really rise to the top. But there has to be that ongoing communication. There has to be that give and take. And it's my responsibility as a representative of the people to ensure that I'm asking the questions of council, of staff, to make sure that they're able to do the things that we want them to do. At the same time, as a representative of the people, it's also my obligation to make sure that I'm letting staff know where maybe they have an opportunity to do a better job and to sort of reorient and refocus how they're doing things. So that's where the give and take comes from. And that's why you've got to have that level of communication.
Okay, excellent. So do you think that our current community engagement is adequate? And if not, how would you improve it?
Actually, I do think that the level of community engagement that the city has right now is adequate, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be better. On the really big issues, the housing element update, the development at 330 Distel, the adoption of the climate action and adaptation plan and reach codes, a lot of people reached out to the council. There were a number of meetings beforehand, community meetings, meetings where staff went to different organizations, LAR and others, spent time really trying to get input, really trying to educate the community why these are important issues, and sort of communicating back what to expect as we went through the process. More recently, you can look at the districting exercise that we're going through right now. I think since our last meeting, staff is meeting with members of the community with different organizations. I know they met with LAR. They've been at the farmers market every week. There's something going on almost every day where staff is reaching out to the residents and trying to get input and trying to educate people what's going on and why it's important. But you can't have that level of engagement at every issue, right? You take a look at a random city council meeting, there could be as many as 10, 15, sometimes 20 different items on our agenda. Staff doesn't have the bandwidth, and frankly, I don't think the residents really have the patience to have that level of engagement on every single issue. And this is why it's so important for residents themselves to sort of pay attention to what's going on at City Hall. I think the reality is that most people in Los Altos are not paying that close attention to what's going on. And they're not doing it, not because they're not interested, not because what we do doesn't matter, but they don't feel a need to, because quite frankly, I think the vast majority of the city residents actually trust the city council. Los Altos is a great place to live. I mean, we have great first responders. The streets are getting cleaned on a regular basis. They're getting maintained. The sewers work. I mean, if you're just sort of walking through our community, there are some wonderful things about it that are, other communities would be envious of. And we have the appearance of a city that, quite frankly, is working really well. And I think it's because, for the most part, we really are working well. And that's why when something happens, when the city adopts a policy that seems out of the blue or not in the interest of our community or one neighborhood, it can be so shocking. As part of the housing element update process, we decided that we were going to rezone the Rancho supermarket area. Mm-hmm. When we actually went forward and rezoned that parcel so that there could be mixed use, perhaps, it was really, really shocking to the neighbors who live close to it, especially the ones who live across the street in particular. Right now, they have a shopping center. They look at the back of a shopping center that's 1 to 2 stories. It's possible that there could be a redevelopment there that could be 3, 4, could be even 5 stories. I hope we don't get something that massive, but we could get something that massive. I don't think that it's going to happen soon, but I do think it's going to happen eventually. And the people who live across the street from Rancho, a lot of them really, they were shocked. Frankly, they felt betrayed. They didn't understand how the council could allow something like that to happen, because it's going to impact their quality of life. You have a big building right across the street from you. It's going to have a shadow. It's probably not going to be as nice as what's there right now. It's absolutely going to impact their lives, potentially in a negative way. Now, as a representative, it was my obligation to meet with people from that street, the neighborhood, explain why we got there, why we came to this decision, and what the larger issues are. And I'm glad to say that when I did sit down and meet with people who live across the street from Rancho, most of them were understanding of why we did what we did. But it comes back to, it was such a shock because they didn't expect something like that to happen, because things really do work very well in the city. The council wants more input from residents. We really do. We want to know what people are thinking. And I do think that there is an opportunity for the city to reach out more broadly to the community, whether it's partnering with civic organizations like LAR and others. I do want to see more of that, to the extent that staff has the bandwidth to do it. And I hope that LAR and other community organizations will reach out to staff more and ask for presentations. It's a great way for us to get our message across, because not only will staff or council or whomever sit down and meet with representatives of LAR and their membership who might come to some kind of a forum, but you can then write a summary about it in your newsletter or put it on your website. That's an additional way that the city can reach out. Mm-hmm. I do think that the city takes some important actions. There's a city manager's weekly newsletter. The city has a public information officer, and I know she makes sure that we have posts on social media outlets. For people who aren't aware of the city manager's newsletter, or who don't follow the city on social media, I invite you to do so. That's one way to sort of keep up to breast about what's going on in the city. And if you know what's going on, you can let us know what you think about it. That would be really useful.
Great, thank you. So Jonathan, our last question, it's a three-part question, and it's a recent issue. How do you think the city can replace the 226 parking spaces in parking plazas 7 and 8 with no net loss of parking spaces? Also, the approximate $20 million land value of those parking plazas and the revenue generated by the visitors who park in those parking spaces.
Yeah. I'm really glad you asked this question, because probably outside of what we need to do for the infrastructure supporting our first responders, this is first and foremost on my mind as a council member right now. Turning a couple of parking plazas into housing, as much affordable housing as possible, is something that we promised to do in our housing element. We promised the state, more importantly, we promised the residents. As part of that, we said that we want to keep the 226 spaces that are currently there and make sure that there is enough additional parking provided that would accommodate the needs of whatever ends up being developed on those parking plazas. That's a promise that we made to the residents. I really do believe that. This is first and foremost on my mind because of what recently happened at 330 Distel. 330 Distel, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a development that is forthcoming at 330 Distel Circle. It's going to be, I think, 5 or 6 stories and will provide about 90 apartments that are all affordable. They're all affordable housing. They're all below market rate. It's great that we are providing that much below market rate housing. It was a controversial plan for several reasons, not the least of which is its height, while it's on the edge of single family residences. When the deal was finally struck for the developer to move forward with the project, part of that deal was to have, I don't know, 100, 120 parking spaces. There were a significant number of parking spaces that were supposed to be developed along with that project. Yeah. And those parking spaces were going to be provided through the use of a mechanical lift. I won't go into the details of it, but it's not an inexpensive way to provide parking, although it's less expensive than going underground to build multiple levels. So we had a deal in place. And then a few months ago, the developer came back to the city and said, this isn't penciling out. We want to get going on this project, but the economy has changed. Construction loans are more expensive. We're not able to raise the money that we need in order to start building. Under California law, you can't require us to build as much parking, provide as much parking as we agreed to do. So in order to get going on this project, under California law, we want to reduce the number of parking spaces that we're providing. And oh, by the way, this isn't a request. The law says you have to grant this request. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. I thought that a deal had been struck in good faith. Residents who live near 330 Distel, I mean, they weren't happy about the deal that was struck necessarily, but they had understood it, and they understood that it was going to be a project that was more or less adequately parked. It now is going to be a building that has far less parking, going to have about 30 to 40 parking spaces. Being told that California law allowed the developer to just unilaterally change the deal, to me was a kick in the pants. And why am I bringing that up? Let's bring it back to what's going to happen downtown. I'm really worried that the same thing can happen downtown. City staff has assured us that this is a different type of a project. The laws that apply to the developer of 330 Distel don't apply to what's happening downtown. I believe them, but look, housing law is changing very quickly in the state of California. And even if the law wouldn't allow a developer to do the same thing downtown that happened at Distel, who knows what laws are going to be passed in the next year or two that maybe will allow that to happen. But I think there's a solution, and this is it. If we want to make sure that there is a certain number of parking spaces that are provided as part of those two new developments, then I think the city needs to undertake the responsibility to make sure that they get developed. Ultimately, this is either going to be a long-term lease or a sale of property. That means that a lot of money is going to be coming into the city coffers. I want us to earmark whatever money comes into the city to make sure that that money is being used to finance this proper amount of parking. So that's regaining the 226 spaces that we said we wanted to keep in our housing element, and enough spaces to accommodate whatever other uses those buildings are going to have. I think if we want to make sure that the parking gets replaced, then we need to put the obligation on us. And fortunately, there is going to be money there because, again, this is going to be a lease or it's going to be a sale. So a lot of money is going to be coming into the city. But if we want to make sure that we get parking that we want, that we need, then we need to take it upon ourselves to ensure that that happens. Then we don't have to worry about a developer coming back and saying, well, this law says something different and we don't agree with what your attorney said. That's when you get that kick in the pants feeling, I think, that a lot of the community felt when it came to 330 Distel.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. That's really very enlightening and reassuring, because that is an issue that a number of residents are concerned about. So, well, I want to thank you. That's the end of our questions. And this is a really good opportunity, I think, for the community to be able to listen to each of the candidates and get their views on these issues that I think are of interest to all the residents. And we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us for this interview.
Freddie, thank you so much for the opportunity. I enjoyed our time together just now. And thank you very much to all your members who are willing to take the time to watch. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.